Discussions on video game controversy, contention, and conflict are the foundation of many a message board. We're ready to embrace hardline declarations, thoughtful opinions, dividing polemics, and weigh the rebuttals and endorsements to render a definite, if uneasy, judgment from our staff. Simply put, if someone at GT has a strong opinion, they'll raise their voice, release a statement to their peers, and receive feedback. Agree or disagree? You'll have to see, but it's not over until you weigh in, vote on the outcome, leave a comment, and let your voice be heard in the final verdict.
You got that? All right.
Roman numerals used to mean something. It took most US players until the early 90s to begin charting when the next Final Fantasy game was due. But after 7, everyone's eyes were always on what Square would do next. The series began to branch off, and rightfully so, with franchises like Crystal Chronicles and Tactics. But the main numeric line remained the heart of the series' magic. Every new entry marked a new style and a new RPG experiment. 7 was 3D, 8 was a realistic romance, 9 was a nod to the old era, 10 spoke for the first time, 11 went online, 12's battle system was in real time, and all of these games had a completely different aesthetic. All of that changed with 13. 10 was given a sequel, and 11 is still online, believe it or not, but 13, love it or hate it, just won't seem to go away. Fabula Nova Crystallis, the umbrella covering all of 13's byproducts, was first announced at E3 in 2006, 7 years ago. Since then, 15 isn't the only game to have changed names. Final Fantasy Type 0, which has still yet to be released in the US, was originally called Agito 13, but the name was changed because Square Enix felt it ultimately had little to do with 13's world. How could a game created to fit in the world of Crystallis end up being removed from it for being irrelevant? What's the point of grouping these games together if they're just going to be pulled apart later on? 13 has spawned 2 sequels and is now being retconned into Final Fantasy XIV Online, a game whose lore is already on thin ice. But all of that wasn't enough. Instead of moving on to new, unexplored ventures in this next generation, Square Enix is going to resuscitate a game announced almost a decade ago in the shadow of another core franchise installment and call it 15. They had no idea they were going to call it 15 until this year. You know it, and I know it. Is that how you imagined 15 to be? When 10 came out, and you explored the brand new lush, focalized world of Spira, and then thought ahead at what 15 might bring, was your every wish and hope that, instead of inviting you to yet another new world in such a landmark installment, they would just dig up a previously ignored project and decide to not make it? Is that the kind of stuff Roman numerals are supposed to be made of? Are we really supposed to sit back and pretend this is all part of some mystical, predestined prophecy and not just Square Enix proving, like they did with Bumbling 14, that they have no idea what to do with their biggest franchise? Are retcons and cover-ups cool now? Did I miss something? 15 looks incredible. I can't wait to play it. I actually didn't play 13 or 13-2 and will probably give 15 a try because it looks so insane. It's exceptionally beautiful and definitely deserves to be called a Final Fantasy game, but if the core series was ever supposed to mean anything, not 15. 15 should be something new, something no one was expecting. Not Versus, not Agni's philosophy, something that will take us days, weeks, months to wrap our heads around after its first announcement. Final Fantasy as a franchise needs to adapt with the times like it always has.
疑いなく信じていた世界は常に変化し、今終わる。
Remember when Disney respected their animated films? That era when releasing a sequel to Sleeping Beauty or Snow White would have been considered blasphemous? It kept the studio challenging itself to produce memorable films every year without riding on the coattails of their classics. Now the studio relies on easy cash-ins like Cars 2 or Planes, blatant exploitations of past successes. It seems as if Square Enix has taken note. It used to mean something when you attached a Roman numeral to the name Final Fantasy. There was a silent code. Games needed to follow a certain number of traditions in order to be deemed worthy of joining such respected pedigree. Final Fantasy games that were too different from the main series were given names such as Mystic Quest and Tactics, or even Vagrant Story, which didn't bear the name at all. Sure, they were great games on their own right, but looking back, it put the company on a slippery slope of brand exploitation. What followed was a parade of games such as Final Fantasy IV The After Years, 7 Dirge of Cerberus, 12 Revenant Wings, 13-2, and 13 Lightning Returns. Now, Square Enix is milking the franchise at levels that even the folks at Activision would be raising eyebrows. Almost every high-budget RPG the studio develops these days is branded as a Final Fantasy game, with a Roman numeral or some weird subtitle. Having said that, I don't think the game should be called Versus 13 or 15, but be branded differently altogether. Given the lesser of the two evils though, I would choose to keep the melodramatic boy band zaniness I've seen so far from the game within the 13 brand, and give the series a fresh start with something completely new to start the new generation.
This isn't bumbling, this is smart business. Final Fantasy Versus XIII has already cost a lot of money to develop, and with the public opinion not so high on 13, it's going to be tough to sell a game called Final Fantasy Versus XIII to a mass market right now. Square Enix's best chance to make back all or just some of its investment is to name this game Final Fantasy XV. It's easier to say, it's easier to sell, it sounds more important, and it seems to kind of suggest that maybe we can all leave all that stupid stuff that happened last generation behind us. More than that, I think it's important for any creative endeavor to be flexible, and it seems weird to criticize an entire company for letting a game change. From movies to TV to video games to final verdict responses, the end product is going to be best when the creators are free to see where things go and cut out what's not fun and follow the things that work. This just isn't the same game that was announced in 2006. So Brandon, you need to adapt. Let there be change. Disagree.
なんだかめんどくさいことになってきたな。
You know, 13 really has been an unlucky number for Final Fantasy fans, and we've been stuck in this 13 rut since before the start of the generation, which is no small feat considering it's the longest console cycle so far. People are tired of 13. Lightning Returns could be a remarkably improved game, but people just don't care enough to pay attention anymore. I understand your point that 15 should indicate a game that's new and different, but to me that's what this game is anyways. Whatever tangential association it has in the Fabula Nova Crystallis universe isn't readily apparent. Perhaps that's just due to my general disinterest in 13. The art style in Versus has always been more eye-catching, and the open environments are also a stark contrast to the original 13. To me, Final Fantasy 13 seemed like a step backwards, while Versus 13 is taking the greater risk in advancing the series. Plus, Versus 13 was just a dumb name from the start, and it's probably more indicative of creative directors bumping heads than anything to do with the games themselves. It sounds like a fighting game based in the Final Fantasy 13 universe, and nobody wants that. Ditching 13 is the best way to get people to feel like the series is finally moving on. Let's just hope that 16 is next, and not 15 too.
Versus 13's name change needed to happen because 13 is garbage, and Square Enix needs to distance themselves in any future games away from that mess. I don't see how this isn't obvious. If there's any problem here with names, it lies within the creation of the ridiculous Fabula Nova Crystallis brand. It wasn't necessary, especially after we found out all the name meant was a series of games loosely connected by a shared mythos. Even the series director Katase mentioned that each development team could interpret that shared mythology as they saw fit. So what the heck was the point in creating this umbrella brand if they weren't even going to be directly connected to each other? There's an easy answer for that. It's called the compilation of Final Fantasy VII. The compilation was a huge success, but it was because Final Fantasy VII is one of the most popular games of all time with a massive fan base craving more from the universe, including that HD remake that you will never get. When Square Enix tried to repeat that same formula with something unproven, Final Fantasy XIII, the experiment blew up in Square Enix's face because 13 was terrible. 13-2 and Lightning Returns, two sequels to the game, only exist after such a disaster because of two reasons. One, they are quick sequels that they can make a cheap buck to recuperate some of that ridiculous production cost of the Final Fantasy XIII, and also because Toriyama, he just can't let go of Lightning, and he's trying to shove her down our throats at every turn. That's why he really should get off the series sometime soon. But anyway, I digress. The point is, these sequels, they weren't part of some mastered timeline or mythos from the get-go. And anyone who's actually played 13-2 can attest to that. What's presented in those games story-wise is a retcon mess. So why should Square Enix subject Versus 13 to this charade? They should just break free and give it a new name to separate it from all that colossal disaster. Listen, Roman numerals still mean something when it comes to Final Fantasy, and Versus 13, aka Final Fantasy 15, has always looked way more ambitious than anything I've seen in Final Fantasy 13. It would have been a disservice to the series to leave Versus 13's name as it was. It deserves to be called 15 because it is and always has been something new. It was painfully clear early on it was never going to have a strong tie to Final Fantasy 13, and anyone under the impression that there was some grand story being woven by the Fabula Nova Crystallis games was delusional. Sticking to something that is doomed to failure is what a fool would do, and that's exactly what sticking to Versus 13's name would be. Incredibly stupid. Square Enix has made a lot of very foolish decisions in recent years, but renaming Versus 13 to 15 isn't one of them. It's perhaps the smartest thing they've done in a long time. The only real question is why it took them so long to do something everyone else seemed to know was obvious and would happen.
こうでなければならないなどというものは本来この世にない。
Final Fantasy seizes the day and overcomes my obsessive fanboy desires by a margin of 3-2, confirming its right to claim the name 15. Brandon Jones, aka me, responds. I'm not surprised I lost. I saw it in the eyes of the editorial team when I proposed this verdict. I probably wrote this to clarify how I really felt on the matter more than anything else. I am surprised, however, that Damiani rode Square Enix harder than I did. I guess the one thing we all agree on is the stewards of Final Fantasy need to start promoting change instead of revisiting the past over and over again. Unless we're talking about a Final Fantasy VI or VII remake, they can revisit that past anytime they want. Most of all, I'm frustrated that 15 is taking so damn long. I don't think it makes Square Enix mysterious or creatively obsessed, just really slow and out of touch with their audience. Hopefully 16 won't be another fantasy based on reality, but a fantasy based on Final Fantasy.
世界は常に変化する。15番目だ。
It was a close call in the comments about last week's episode about Red Dead Redemption being better than GTA 5. Bottled Water 5 agreed, stating, Brandon Jones is right at the end about them getting better with each game. That's why Red Dead Redemption is a better game than GTA 4. And I do have to emphasize game. RDR builds on what was accomplished in GTA 4 and improves on it. User Siggy furthers this notion, saying, totally agree that RDR is the better game. However, it's like they said, Rockstar continually improves their games, and RDR has a bit more refined mechanics than GTA 4. This will most likely change when GTA 5 comes out. On Facebook, however, Henrik Thorsjo disagrees. I love both games very much, but what separates them for me is that when I ran amok in GTA 4, I laughed. When I sort of ran amok in RDR and shot buffaloes, subsequently making them extinct, I felt like shit. I guess RDR gripped me more emotionally, but I had a bunch of hilarious moments in GTA 4, so which one is best? GTA 4.